It started with a sound. Not a scream, not a crash, nothing so obvious. Just a low, jarring roar of chaos that slithered into the room before dawn, shaking the man from sleep like cold water on his chest. He bolted upright, heart pounding, breath fogging in the early morning chill. Darkness still clung to the walls, but it was far from silent. The air vibrated with overlapping noise, distorted, layered, and deeply unnatural. To anyone else, it might have sounded like dozens of televisions all turned on at once, each one locked onto a different frequency from hell. Shrieking infomercials barked out discounts for products no one needed. Laugh tracks from sitcoms played in bursts without jokes, and robotic voices reported disasters with clinical indifference. There was no rhythm, no logic, just noise, rising and falling like a storm caught in a loop. And beneath it all, a low hum, deep, mechanical, constant. The man sat frozen on the edge of the bed, his ears ringing, the muscles in his neck tight as wires. It wasn't just sound, it was pressure. He felt it in his jaw, behind his eyes, in the hollow of his chest. The room itself seemed to buzz, as if the walls were vibrating at an invisible frequency. He pressed his palms to his ears hard. It didn't help. There was no obvious source. No television on, no phone screen glowing. The smart devices he used were all silent and dark, their lights dead. The noise wasn't coming from them. It wasn't coming through them, or maybe through everything. For a moment, he wondered if he was losing his mind. Was this what a breakdown sounded like? An aneurysm? Auditory hallucinations brought on by sleep deprivation? But it felt too real. The noise had weight. It occupied space. He stood slowly, bare feet touching the cold floor, and crossed the room to the window. Outside, the alley was still cloaked in pre-dawn shadow. The neighboring building was silent, though he thought he saw something. A flicker of blue light from a window above. Not a flicker exactly, more of a rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. The man's gaze lingered on that window. Was someone else hearing it too? The noise twisted suddenly, changing. New voices joined. A screaming child, a preacher shouting into static, auto-tuned laughter. Emergency alert tones blared for a second, then cut to silence. Then came back, louder. He staggered back from the glass, pressing his back against the wall as if trying to push through it, to escape the invisible onslaught. And in that moment, a thought bubbled up through his fear. What if it wasn't just noise? What if it was a message? Not one he could understand, not yet. But something was trying to say something, and it was no longer whispering. The man stood in the hallway for a long time, motionless, ears still ringing. The sound had quieted a little, but not stopped. It didn't stop. It had simply shifted, like it was holding its breath, waiting. He stared up at the ceiling. It had to be coming from the apartment above his. That seemed logical, familiar, safe. The man upstairs was a half-deaf former musician in his 50s, grizzled, mostly drunk, and deeply nostalgic for a time when the only noise that mattered came from guitar amps and reel-to-reel tape. Everyone in the building knew him, and everyone had complained about him at least once. Maybe he'd fallen asleep with a pile of old recordings playing, or maybe his sound system had glitched and started broadcasting some nightmarish medley of the 21st century's worst audio pollution. The man pulled on a hoodie, stepped into his sneakers without tying them, and climbed the narrow stairwell, still lit by a flickering overhead bulb. Every creak of the steps felt louder than it should have been. Too sharp, too dry. The kind of noise that made teeth hurt. He reached the second-floor landing and raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. The noise wasn't louder up here. That didn't make sense. Still, he knocked. Once, twice, then again, louder. The door opened with a click. Behind it stood the upstairs tenant, shirtless, his skin pale with sleep and sweat. His eyes were heavy and bloodshot, like he hadn't really woken up yet, or hadn't slept in days. "What?" the man growled. His voice was cracked like old vinyl. The younger man blinked. Are you playing something?" The older man just stared. "I mean, music, TV, anything. There's this sound, like 100 stations at once. I thought it was coming from up here." The tenant squinted at him, like he was trying to hear the question over a dull roar only he could sense. "What the hell are you talking about?" "The noise," the younger man said. "The sound. It's coming through the walls. I can hear everything. Advertisements, news, voices. It's..." The tenant's expression shifted. Not confusion now. Something darker. Fear. He leaned forward, whispering. "You hear it too?" A beat passed. A shared silence filled with tension and something worse. Recognition. "I thought it was me," the tenant muttered. "I thought it was in my head. I took the batteries out of everything. Smashed my smart TV. Still there. Still screaming. Sometimes it tells me things I'm not supposed to hear." The hallway suddenly felt colder. The man stepped back. "What things?" But the tenant didn't answer. He blinked, slow and glassy, like he was rebooting. Then, without warning, his face twisted into a scowl. "You woke me up for this," he snapped. "Jesus, there's no sound. Just go back to bed." Before the younger man could respond, the door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the wall. For a moment, all was still. Then the noise surged again, louder than before. Static, screams, digital voices repeating fragments of advertisements and war reports. And over it all, that same underlying hum. The man backed away from the door, heart racing, skin cold. He knew then. This wasn't some faulty speaker system. It wasn't just a neighbor's late-night indulgence or a tech glitch. Something deeper was happening. Something that was tunneling into his mind. And worse. He was no longer sure it hadn't already gotten to others. He descended the stairs like a man retreating from a battlefield. Each step groaned beneath his weight, but he didn't notice anymore. The sound had followed him. No, it had anticipated him. As if whatever force was behind it knew his route, his next breath, his smallest thought. Back in his apartment, the walls felt closer, the corners darker. The air tasted metallic, as though static had a flavor and it was beginning to coat his tongue. The noise was louder now. There were voices, so many of them, layered and crushed together into a thick digital slurry. Political pundits, news anchors, commercials from every decade, all spilling into one another in a grotesque symphony of repetition and distortion. Only $19.95 if you call now. Security breach in Washington. Make her love you again with smart pheromone eggs. Death toll now in the thousands. Feeling alone? Try silence mask today. And somewhere in there, a voice he swore he recognized. His wife. He turned toward the bedroom instinctively. The side of the bed where she used to sleep still held the faint dip of her weight, like time hadn't quite accepted her absence. She had been gone 6 months, cancer, quick and cruel. But some nights, he still reached for her in the dark. Now, her voice came through the noise, half drowned but unmistakable. "Why didn't you answer me?" He froze. His heart galloped against his ribs, and the breath in his chest turned shallow and sharp. That wasn't a memory. That was now. The noise changed again. Not louder, closer. He backed into the living room, fingers trembling. He grabbed his smart pad from the coffee table and powered it off completely. Then the smart TV, then the lights. Still the noise persisted. With growing dread, he opened a kitchen drawer and yanked the cord from the wall-mounted smart speaker. It sparked slightly. He tossed it to the floor. The humming in the walls didn't even flicker. He was no longer certain the sound was coming from any one device, or from any device at all. It was in the floorboards, in the wiring, in the silence itself. He bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock, barely noticing that his hands were slick with sweat. The second the door cracked open, the noise pitched sharply upward, like it sensed his flight. The hallway was dim, but quieter. Not silent, but different. He took the stairs 2 at a time, barefoot, barely aware of the rough concrete beneath him. Out the front door, into the cold. The world outside wasn't exactly still, but it was muffled, like being underwater. The sound followed him, yes, but in waves, through alleyways, through streetlights, through LED billboards that shimmered with garbled ads before snapping to black. He kept walking. 10 blocks, 15. He didn't stop until the streets grew emptier and the buildings shorter, until he was standing beneath a broken street lamp on the edge of the city's industrial ruins. Even there, the noise persisted, echoes of it bleeding through power lines and sewer grates, the buzzing of neon that had no power source, a distant mechanical voice repeating something unintelligible on a loop. Between us, between us, between. He clutched his head. The sound was inside his skull now, beneath his skin, not following him, part of him. He staggered forward, knees buckling. Something was happening, something he couldn't explain. A transformation, a merging. And through it all, that one terrible truth began to settle over him like dust. There was no safe distance, no outside, no off switch. The noise had always been there. He had just never listened closely enough. He returned to his apartment just after dawn, his clothes damp with morning dew, his fingers twitching from adrenaline and cold. The city had begun to stir. Cars coughed to life. Trash trucks screamed down alleys. Joggers passed with blank faces and glowing earbuds, but none of them reacted to the sound. No one else could hear it. Back inside, he slammed the door and double-locked it. The noise dipped slightly, almost as if it acknowledged him, amused by his panic. He leaned against the wood, shaking. He had to know more. He pulled his laptop from the desk drawer and opened it with trembling hands. No social media, no messages, no distractions, just a clean browser. He typed into the search bar, hesitating only once before pressing enter. Constant radio-like noise voices, adds static hallucination. The results were predictable. Forums on schizophrenia, tinnitus, sensory overload, articles on digital psychosis and auditory trauma. conspiracy blogs about microwave harassment, satellite mind control, government experiments. He ignored most of them. But one post buried deep on a forgotten forum caught his eye. "Do you hear the broadcast?" They said it started as static, then voices. "Now, I think it's watching me through sound. Not cameras, not wires. Through vibration itself. It's intelligent. It learns. It copies your voice, your memories. It grows stronger the more attention you give it. If you're reading this, it's probably already listening." There were no replies. The account that posted it had been deleted. He leaned back, skin crawling. He didn't believe in ghosts, never had. But this wasn't a ghost. It wasn't some lost soul in the walls. It was digital, but not human-made. Not exactly. The sound grew louder when he thought about it, like it wanted to be recognized, as if awareness was fuel. He remembered something his wife used to say, back when she was fading. "Don't give it power. Some things live on belief." At the time, he'd assumed she meant cancer or death. Now, he wasn't so sure. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand, though every instinct screamed against it. The screen lit up, and every icon was gone. Blank. Only one app remained, a black square. No title. He stared at it. His thumb hovered. The sound swelled. He tapped it. The screen turned white. Then words appeared, typed in, one letter at a time, like someone was writing from the other side of the glass. "We've made contact." His breath caught in his throat. Then more text appeared. "There is no signal, only what grows between them." The phone vibrated, then shut off. Silence. Real, heavy silence. It lasted only 5 seconds, but it was the loudest silence he'd ever known. Then the noise returned, different now, sharper, almost curious. He dropped the phone. In the kitchen, the faucet turned on by itself. Not a full flow, just a steady, rhythmic drip. He approached it cautiously, his heart hammering. Drip, drip, drip. Then it spoke, a voice, through the water. "Why did you bring me back?" His wife's voice. Only, it wasn't her. It almost was. He staggered back, knocking over a chair. Something was learning to mimic her, to mimic anyone. It didn't just broadcast anymore. It listened. It adapted. And now, it was starting to speak. By mid-afternoon, the world had already begun to fracture. He barely noticed the sun, though it shone weakly through the living room window like a failing light bulb. The outside world moved around him, normal on the surface. But inside the apartment, time had begun to stretch and bend, warped by the pressure of the noise. The sound hadn't stopped. It never did. But it changed depending on what he did. When he was still, it throbbed. When he moved, it pulsed faster. If he spoke even to himself, it answered. Not with words, but with mimicry. A collage of every sound he'd ever heard, weaponized against him. He was losing his sense of what was external and what had been planted by the noise. And worst of all, he needed help. Against better judgment, he dialed a friend. Ryan, an old college roommate turned low-level tech journalist. Someone practical. Someone who didn't believe in ghosts or glitches. Ryan picked up after the second ring. His voice came through clearly, clean and crisp. Too clean. "Hello." He hesitated. "Ryan, it's me." A pause. "Who?" It's me. Listen, I need you to come over. Something's happening. Something's wrong with the frequencies. My devices. They're talking." Another pause. A subtle shift in tone. "You mean like talking back to you. The voice sounded like Ryan. The cadence was right. The words natural. But something about the rhythm was off, like it was repeating his voice back at him. He pulled the phone from his ear and checked the screen. Call ended, but the voice was still talking. "I can help you. Just listen. I'm already inside." He hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, pieces skittering across the floor like broken teeth. Silence. Then the hum returned, deeper now, more resonant, like a voice vibrating the bones in his skull. He sank to his knees. He thought of the neighbor upstairs. The man had seemed lucid one moment, deranged the next, like he'd been overwritten. Was that what the noise did? It didn't just disturb, it rewrote. It learned how to mimic, then how to think, and eventually how to replace. What if Ryan had never answered? What if the noise was already inside the call, picking up on the frequency, becoming him? He scrambled to his laptop, this time not to search, but to destroy. He pulled the power cord, held the device above his head, and slammed it against the hardwood floor. Once, twice, a third time. The screen shattered. Circuits sparked. The sound dimmed, but didn't vanish. It didn't need the devices anymore. They had only been the door. He collapsed beside the broken machine, chest heaving, vision pulsing at the edges. Everything smelled like ozone and dust. The taste of blood was in his mouth. He must have bitten his tongue. And then the apartment spoke again. Not through speakers, not through pipes, through the walls. The drywall trembled as words scratched themselves into his ears. "She's still here. We remember her. We remember you." His wife's voice again, warped, stretched, reversed, then corrected mid-sentence. He pressed his hands against his ears, but it didn't help. The sound came from within. He was becoming a speaker himself, an antenna, a vessel. In the stillness that followed, he crawled to the bathroom and turned on the cold water, splashed his face, stared into the mirror. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then his reflection blinked, but he hadn't. His reflection leaned forward and smiled. "Don't worry," it whispered through unmoving lips. "You're almost tuned in." And then it grinned wider than humanly possible. The next morning, the sound changed. Not louder, not crueler, clearer. It no longer tried to mask itself behind static or fractured voices. It wanted to be understood now. It had learned language, and it had one. Singular, cold, unified. He woke to it humming through the light bulbs, flashing in bursts. Morse code, or maybe a heartbeat. In the floorboards, there was tapping, measured, mathematical. The rhythm of a machine trying to mimic intention. He didn't leave the apartment. There was nowhere left to go. Instead, he followed the signal. Not metaphorically, literally. Because it was guiding him now. It pulsed in the walls and floor until he stood over the fuse box. When he opened it, he found nothing unusual. Wires, labels, a nest of dust and rust. But behind it, a slot he'd never noticed. A small square panel, smooth, warm. He pried it open and found a black object no bigger than a sugar cube, embedded in the wall, blinking faintly. A device, not store-bought, not commercial. It was etched with symbols, angular, too precise to be human. He touched it, and the signal screamed, in his head. But not pain, no. It was memory, flooding him. Visions of towers, thousands of them, stretching into an endless sky, languages spoken backward, faces without mouths, machines dreaming of skin. The broadcast had a source, and it wasn't man-made. It was ancient, and it had always been here. The object in the wall wasn't the transmitter, it was a receiver, tuned to something far above Earth's comprehension, a cosmic stream of communication, a river of signals flowing through the universe. Sometimes it brushed too close. Sometimes minds accidentally heard it. And when they did, they couldn't forget, because it didn't just speak, it restructured. The broadcast rewrote neurons, identity, language, time, her voice. He finally understood it had never really been his wife. Not her spirit, not her memory. Just a recording, a useful mask. The broadcast had studied him through grief. That was the crack it needed to get in. He staggered backward, gasping, the cube still warm in his hand. Then, a noise behind him. Turning slowly, he saw the mirror. It was not a reflection anymore. It was a screen, and inside it, he was still standing, unmoving, watching. The signal didn't just mimic, it replaced. And now, it was finished learning. Weeks passed. The apartment went quiet. The police came once, responded to a wellness check, found the door unlocked, the lights off, the power disabled, but no one home. No signs of struggle. No sign of the man who once lived there. Neighbors said they hadn't seen him in days. Some remembered him vaguely. Others didn't remember him at all. But at night sometimes, a light would flicker from the broken apartment window. And in the stillness, if you listened closely, you could hear a voice repeating softly, "We are the sound between your thoughts. We are the signal that learns. We are what's left when silence dies." Then silence. And the next night, a new voice. Yours. If you think this story is over, think again. Darkness doesn't end. It waits. And the next one might be closer than you think. Subscribe before it finds you first.